the question that comes is basically this. Our organizers say, Lynn, over the course of the last immediate period, especially since the last webcast, we get more and more questions from our supporters, and they're serious questions from people who are saying specifically, what does Lynn want us to do? What does Lynn want me to do? Several supporters have written in saying, while I understand that LPAC's resources may be limited, there are congressional seats all over the country, as well as Senate seats, where citizens simply have to file to run. There are not petition requirements, and there are only minimal filing fees. The question that is coming in is, should we put out a call for candidates for citizen candidates to challenge some of these jokers in Washington, number one, using your program and policy as a platform? And if not, can you please tell us specifically what it is we should do in the immediate days ahead?
Mankind is distinguished from the animals by ideas. Animals do not have ideas. Men and women should. It's too bad our president doesn't have any ideas. He should. Now, the campaign policy is, our policy is what I've tried to emphasize to people who've gone into this now, into this business. The first thing is the quality of the way you organize the campaign. That's the first thing. Quality means, first of all, principle. Now, the mistake in U.S. politics, particularly in a time of crisis, is the tendency to look at mass organizing as being something different in each area. Now, it's desirable to have something in each area, of course. But the crucial thing is not to have everybody have their opinion, but to try to achieve, which is the goal of humanity, I presume, is to have useful ideas and ideas that are coherent and going to be effective. So you want to sort out the idea policy. The first thing, the first problem that comes to mind, especially in a time of crisis like this, is having everybody run is good, but it's not necessarily very good. The question is to decide on what kind of conception we're going to present, and is it going to be a national conception, or is it going to be a heterogeneous collection of various conceptions? What we did in the case of the three candidacies which are presented to you today was to define a national campaign for the Congress. The idea is what should take over the Congress in terms of thinking about national policy and priorities now. Therefore, what we want to have and must have is a body of people elected, either as a majority or a very large minority speaking, which is able to walk into the Congress and say, here is our faction's national policy. Now, some people say we have that in the form of party organization. But I can tell you there's no such thing as coherence in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. The reason why they make such lousy agreements, because they're really intrinsically disagreements. I'll support you on this if you'll support me on that. I'll swindle the guys out of this if you'll swindle them out of that. Go along to get along, which means no principles are involved. Just go along to get along. And we all rub, one hand rubs the other. That's the way it's going. What we need is actually a sense, a consensus sense, of what is required for this nation as a nation at this time. The Congress must be regarded as an institution which informs the presidency and sometimes informs the presidency in very strong terms, very influential terms. And that's right. That's the way the Constitution was designed. But both parties, the houses of the Congress and the presidency otherwise, are part of the presidential institution. And the object is to come to a conclusion on what we're going to do now, as at least a good approximation, to deal with what the national problem is. And therefore, if we're going to deliberate on selection of candidates, shouldn't we deliberate on that? Don't deliberate on how to get along. Let's say the issue is we want to make the right choice for our presidency in this current congressional election period. We're concerned about the issue for the nation. And we consider the relationship between the presidency and the Congress, and the Supreme Court, hopefully, is all right. I don't know. But anyway, that which is going to converge on this question. And the vote, whatever happens, should therefore be posed is, what does this nation need? And the Congress and the executive branch must deliberate that question. It's not sharing, you get a bit of this and you get a bit of that. That's the idea that's used, but that's what destroys us. Because what happens, we get into a situation, we do often. The Congress is a mess. There's no clear idea carried into action by the Congress. The executive branch is a mess, and the problem is there. And none of this stuff that we're discussing, in a sense, in these terms, corresponds with the national issue. I mean, the problem of government is essentially equivalent to a scientific problem and solving a scientific problem. We have a challenge before us. The next step, where are we going from here? What's the right choice? So we have to achieve a national consensus. We achieve it in our system, essentially by the population gathered around people who are running for office or in office, in the executive branch, in the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And we're trying to solve a common problem by debating it among ourselves. So we're trying to define interests which will meet and raise this issue of conflict. What is the right policy for our nation? And our system will work when it's treated that way. But when you treat it as a sea of confusion, I'm running on this issue, I'm running on that issue, so forth. No, there has to be a principal issue. The principal issue, what does this nation need? And you have a lot of other issues to discuss, some of them in particular. But the particular issues should be discussed from the standpoint of first defining what the national purpose is. The national purpose first, then the subsidiary issues. Not the other way around. When you get the other way around, you get the wheeling and dealing, and you're sold out. How many times have people voted for a candidate and looked at the result of the election and so they said they were sold out? Why? Because we have to, as individuals, if you want to be a politician, a good statesman, you have to take the concern of the world and our nation into heart. You have to be concerned about our nation and the world first. What's good for the world? What's good for our nation? Then what should we do about that? And reach a consensus on what's good for this nation, what's good for the world. What do we do about that? And having decided that that's what is good, how do we implement that? Now everybody chimes in. You each get your turn. You each make your own proposal. Oh, I've got a problem in this area. I've got a problem in this area. Now that we've agreed that the national issue is this, or the regional issue is this, how do we handle this particular problem? And then a candidate has to deal with that particular problem, representing the people in that area. But the primary thing is a national policy. The candidate must think about the nation first, and then apply the policy for the nation. Now, given that fact that that's what the nation needs, how do I deal then with what's needed here? How do I deal with even a simple thing like a question of justice, of a congressman intervening to try to have an injustice corrected? That's simple. But you have to start from the top, not from the bottom up. And we're told that we have democracy as long as we stick to bottom-up approaches. You know, the firemen in this district had a problem. The fire plug was put in the wrong place. We're running on the issue where that fire plug belongs. That's the kind of problem I see. And I see that in our political problem. We think small. We think stupid. And people who aren't actually stupid think stupid when they go into politics. They don't. They say, we're small. We think the individual, this kind of thing. We like anarchy. Huh? And they do. But they don't like the result of it. And therefore, we have to remind them that anarchy is not a good idea. There is such a thing as individual right, individual preference, individual opportunity. But you cannot provide them, those things, unless you are concerned with the mother of all good things, which is a national and global policy, a relationship among nations. How should nations relate to each other? Now, that should determine how you define national policy. How you define national policy comes down the layer. How do you now deal with this problem and that problem? And the general idea of what is justice, and the idea of what is justice is, what do you think a human being is? What do you think the difference between a human being and an animal is? What are the requirements of a human being as opposed to an animal? We think small. We don't think scientifically. We don't think artistically. Our art stinks, and our thinking stinks, and our science stinks. Well, these are things we got to fix. Thank you.